You are listening to the Impact Brevard podcast, brought to you by East Coast Christian Center. Impact Brevard exists to support business leaders who want to serve Christ in their daily work life. We provide a setting for leaders to connect, discuss, and find solutions to the unique and often unaddressed issues that leaders face both at work and at home. The meeting is open to all business owners and leaders. Please enjoy today's episode, hosted by Jeannie Terry.
All right, welcome to Impact Brevard. Today is Thursday, June 3rd, 2021. I'm your host, Jeannie Terry, and today we find ourselves again at the beautiful 28 North Gastro Pub in the avenues of Vieira. Today I get the pleasure of introducing you to Emily Deaton. Emily is the COO of Jet Aviva, which provides aircraft brokerage and acquisition services. In short, she sells jets. In her first year as COO, Emily led the company to their most profitable year despite unprecedented times and unforeseen market disruptions. Emily is one of the very few women in an executive leadership role within the business aviation industry. She's a featured contributor, to industry publication JetNet IQ Pulse and a speaker at key aviation industry events. Today, Emily's going to speak about leaning into uncertainty, and uncertainty has definitely had an upswing since early 2020. And Emily, you helped lead your team at Jet Aviva through this surge of uncertainty, and we're going to get into that. But first, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for being here at Impact Brevard.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
I introduced you a little bit about on your professional side. What about your personal side? Could you share some details with us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As Jeannie mentioned, yes, I've had a very busy business career in aviation, but I am also a mom to a very big blended family. One of my kids is actually here listening in, but my husband and I together have 7 children from lots of different age ranges, and we also are pretty busy staying involved at church. We've got kids in various sporting events. We like to remodel houses. We probably need to stop doing as much of that as we have been doing, but we certainly stay busy. We have a lot of fun. Before you move on, I do want to give a couple of disclaimers I think are going to be really important just for context today. One thing that is super important that I want to establish is I am where I am in my career because of the grace of God. It's essential that you understand that. I don't want you to think that I, either lucked into this or earned my way into it, so to speak. I'm extremely and richly blessed, and that's important to have for context when you hear the things that I'm going to share. Also, I am going to be discussing leadership from a position of faith. So things that we're going to talk about with uncertainty and humility and transparency are very much made easier, I think, when you have confidence in the Lord and His plan for your life. It enables you to not try to control so much. So I wanted to establish that as a foundation.
Very good.
Yeah.
So Emily's here today to address a few topics about leaning into uncertainty. So we all as leaders here can begin using these proven techniques right away. We're going to cover areas such as leading your team in uncertainty, creating a supportive culture, and of course, humility and authenticity in leadership. Emily, let's start first with uncertainty. What is it, and how do you see uncertainty?
It's a really good question, and I think that at the end of the day, uncertainty is really just not having all the answers. And I think uncertainty can sometimes be the result of a massive disruption. So like COVID is an example of a tremendous amount of uncertainty. But in reality, I think as leaders, we face uncertainty every single day, meaning the decisions that we make, we don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. And yet at the same time, as leaders, we're often looked to by our team to have all of the answers. So how do you effectively lead in that environment is I think, critically important. And one of the things that I think is important for us to embrace as leaders in uncertainty is, and it will lead into our discussion around humility, is being really comfortable not having all the answers. And yet asking good questions, relying on your team, collaborating, and sort of trusting the process even when you can't see the end. Because your comfort level with that as a leader is going to dictate your team's comfort level with the uncertainty. So we faced COVID knowing we really didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but how important it was for us to make decisions and continue moving forward in light of not knowing what the outcome was going to look like.
That's good. So in light of not knowing what the outcome is going to look like, during this process, you're leading a group of very high-performing professionals. Let's just start right there, right? So you lead people who perform at high capacity. So that kind of sounds easy, right? You just lead and they just perform, right?
Yes, I actually love this question from Jeannie because it did make me laugh. It sounds great, right? Like everyone on your team is solid, they know what they're doing, like what could be hard? And there's actually a lot that's hard about that. In fact, on my team, so I manage our sales force, but on our sales team is also our company CEO and our company president. So I'm leading people in their day-to-day operational go-to-work business, but they're also leaders in their own right, and they're also extremely talented and tenured and have years and years of experience. And in fact, most of the people on my team are older than me, have more experience than me, have been doing it longer. And this is where we'll get into the humility piece, but it's really important for me to know that I am not the smartest person in the room, and I'm totally okay with that. But that has to be communicated to them. So managing high performers, there's a lot here, right? But one of the, two takeaways. One, how you define leadership. If you're looking at it as management versus support, I think with high performers, that's really hard for them. Right? Because frankly, they're doing really well. The things that they're doing are working, and that's awesome. That doesn't mean you can't still support them and you can't add value, but you have to establish a position where they feel comfortable opening up to you and asking about support. And then the second piece of that is there are certain things that high performers have a tendency to struggle with. And in my experience, the top two are time management and delegation. High performers are busy. They take on a lot. Right? So you've got to be able to coach them to that. And then also encouraging them to delegate. And I'm not going to get into necessarily all the tricks, but the point here is that there are always things that even high performers can work on and improve and do better. And you really have to establish a relationship with your high performers so that you can really have a forum for building on their skill sets and investing in them and continuing to support them.
So let's talk about that. How do you support a high performer? You're not necessarily managing them because they're already performing, so to speak. But so how would you provide that support that you're talking about?
So for me, I think it's really comes down to the importance of the relationship and having structured one-on-ones. Very intentional communication, I think, is critical when it comes to really managing anyone, but I find that this is especially important with high performers. And yes, there is a fly, and we're just going to keep moving forward. So a couple of things here that, and again, as a takeaway, so some of you are taking notes, if you aren't having a regularly scheduled one-on-one with the people on your team, it's one of the biggest things I can encourage you to do. And it for a couple of different reasons. One, it provides a platform, frankly, and I'll talk a little bit about the structure here, but people don't really want to go out of their way to approach you about things. It's uncomfortable, right? But they all need help. But you got to create an environment where they have the opportunity to ask for support. And they're not going to do it right away. And that's where the consistency comes in. I told Jeannie this before when we were talking about this topic. I ask my team members the same question every single time we talk. How can I help you? What can I do to support you? Is there anything that you're challenged with? And then they usually say, no, I'm good. And I say, are you sure? Like, is there anything? And I push a little and I dig. And maybe the first meeting, they don't share anything. Maybe the second, third, fourth meeting. But I've been doing this with my team for 2.5 years now. And now I'm finding that I'm getting really solid things that they're bringing to the table when we talk about issues and support needed. Because again, we not only did I establish a relationship over that time, but anytime they asked me for support, I made sure that I delivered. And now I've created this environment where they're comfortable coming to me and asking for help. The other thing on one-on-ones before we leave this topic, because I think it's really important. If you are having one-on-ones, but they don't have any structure, this is something else that's a really easy thing to implement and has a tremendous amount of value. Nobody likes to go into a conversation they don't know what to expect. Like, oh, I have this one-on-one with my boss. Like, yay. I don't think anyone's ever been excited about that. And honestly, I have one-on-one sometimes where I'm not excited about it. I'm like, oh, okay, because yes, we do them all the time. They're important. So don't reschedule them. Don't cancel them. Because if you do that, the message you're sending to your team is other things are more important than them. So you really got to commit to this. But also provide a structure. So I use an RPI format, which is results, progress, and issues. So we have goals, we have targets, and then we talk about them. Then you don't have to have a financial target. Yes, I manage a lot of salespeople, but I also manage support people. But they have something that they're working towards. It's very clear what you want them to do, right? What's their deliverable for your company? They have targets, and then we talk about their results. Then we talk about progress, which are a set of initiatives that they define every 90 days. We call it a 90-day sprint. Like, these are my top 5 things that I'm really focused on. These are my projects or initiatives, whatever. And then we spend a portion of our call. How are you doing in these areas? What progress are you making? Where are you running into hurdles? How are you not advancing this? P, progress. And then issues. And that's my favorite question. Like, what's not working? How can I support you? How can I help you? And guys, I get everything from, my computer isn't working, or I can't log into such and such. Like, it can be super simple, but that could be a big thing for them. Or it could be as big as, like, I'm going through a divorce. And I've absolutely had people come to me with that. And I'm grateful, because now I actually have a lot more context as to what's going on and where they're being challenged. But it starts with the format, because you're not going to get that information from your people if you don't give them an opportunity to share it.
That's so good. I want to permeate there a little bit.
It's fine.
You said there's a format, and it's regularly scheduled.
Yep.
And they know what they're getting into before they walk into the room or they're on the phone with you to do this. At what point do you know, like, as a leader, are you supporting them and not disempowering them and doing their work for them? Like, is there ever an issue with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of a lead a horse to water, can't make them drink. I definitely use that all the time. You want to create an opportunity for success, so I will help them get there, right? I set an expectation for the call, for example. Here's what we're going to go through, and I would love deeply if they came prepared every time. They're not always going to do that, and that's okay. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. The purpose, though, is to still have a productive call. So once we're in the environment, if I need to support by saying, like, hey, you don't have your results ready? Cool, no problem. I have your results, because this isn't for me. This call is not for me. This call is not an opportunity for me to know where they're at with their opportunity pipeline. I know where they're at with their opportunity pipeline, right? This is for them. Mm-hmm. And once they start to realize, let's look at your results, let's see where you are. Let's talk about your initiatives. As they start to see the value, they start to take more ownership. But you have to step your way there. You can't assume they're gonna understand why it's valuable right out of the gate. And in the meantime, it's more important, in my opinion, to invest the time to get the value before you just start asking them to take over for themselves. So it's a process.
And are these calls typically
30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay.
Always 30.
So let's go on and talk about humility and transparency in leadership. What does that mean to you, and why is that important?
I mean, it means a lot. I mean, and I won't get into too much of the definition of humility. I think you guys know what I mean. But 2 of the things we've already talked about play here, right? We talked about embracing uncertainty and not having all the answers. Not having all the answers immediately requires humility. And I think for a lot of people, when they become leaders, or they're in charge, or they're given more responsibility, I very, very often see somebody that may be a great team player that gets promoted into a leadership role immediately become a different person. It's like they woke up in the morning and they said, I'm a boss now, so I have to behave a certain way. I have to be a certain way. Like, I'm in charge. They have their leadership jacket on. And they're just not approachable anymore. They lost all of the things that made them such wonderful team contributors, and most of the time led to them getting promoted, and then they feel that they have to change. So humility in leadership is really about a total 180 from that point of view. And you hear about servant leadership and you hear these things, but it really all starts there. It really starts with taking yourself out of the equation and looking at how you can provide the most support for your team and adapt to their different styles and change the way you communicate and change the way you lead. All of that is sort of an absence of self, right? Because it's not about me. Even in the one-on-one we just talked about, it's not about me, it's about them. So humility is sort of at the core of that. Transparency, I think, is also important. And for me, this is what really will set the tone in the culture of your organization. Because I recall lots of those, like, we'll call them water cooler conversations. So while I work for a very small company now, I spent 7 years at Embraer Executive Jets. It's a big company, which has a very structured and rigid corporate hierarchy. So, and a lot of what you would hear when people would talk about culture is they would say, well, it starts at the top, right? And it's so true. But guess what? You're at the top now. And I think a lot of people, once they get there, they forget, right? Like, a lot of the culture is not about what you put on the sign in the break room or the email that you send around or the cheesy company values that you have, which we have them. Like, they're cool. They serve a purpose. But it really is about, like, how you walk out your day every single day. And transparency for me is critical. Why? Because if I am not transparent in my work, my life, the things that I do wrong, the things that I do well, communicating, the challenges that I'm facing, work-life balance, all of those things, like, even just recognizing the things that I'm not good at. Hey, I struggle with this, I struggle with that. If I can't do that, why on earth would I expect my team to do the same back to me? And yet, it's so easy to fall into this trap, to think that you have to present that you have it all together all the time. You have to lead by this example of, like, I'm the hardest worker in the room and I always have it under control and I manage my time perfectly and I show up early and I stay late every day. Like, no, I don't. So be a real human being so that your people can be real human beings. And then you start to have this culture of people that you can establish real relationships. You can have actual communications and trust. But at its very, very core, it's really about taking your ego out of the equation and being transparent.
So ego is the issue then. You're saying pretty much if once you become a leader, you're no longer transparent. You have to seem like you've got it all together. That's where it comes to be like it's all about you. It's all about the leadership presentation that I have to appear a certain way.
I think it's some of that. I also think it's that misnomer that because you're in charge now, you have to have all the answers. So, I mean, and the reality is people don't. And some of the best leaders in the world are good leaders because they surround themselves with people that are subject matter experts. You know, like, you don't have to be good at everything, but you have to be good at, again, like, getting the best out of your people. So I think it ties in. I think ego is almost a little bit too narrow because people are like, oh, well, I don't have an ego, so I'm good here. And it's a little bit broader than that. I think it's a little bit deeper.
And so what about the delegation? You had mentioned earlier that high performers have trouble delegating. Why is that? And maybe can you give them a word of advice on how they can delegate effectively?
I'd be happy to. I think high performers struggle with this because they're really good at what they do. People who are really good at what they do have a hard time turning that over to somebody else because their immediate assumption is that person is not going to do it as good as they would. And I get it. And most of the time, that's right. That's correct. However, especially when I'm managing high performers, they're typically trying to do too much. So I do think delegation and time management go hand in hand, right? There's a lot of strong correlation here. So unless you are able to offload tasks that aren't really giving you the best return on your investment, because there's only so much time to go around, if you can't do this consistently, you're going to do too much and then you're either going to burn out or you're just not going to be as productive as you possibly could. So, delegation. This is actually something I learned from the Global Leadership Summit, so that's my pitch. Go to that. It's amazing. But Craig Groeschel talks about something called equip through the dip. And I use this with my team all the time. And really what it means is that you have to anticipate that decrease in productivity, right? So I'm going to delegate this to some person. I have to automatically know that they're not going to do it as well as I am. Own that up front. Like, be okay with it. And then walk side by side with that person that you delegated it to and equip them to get better. What I often find is there's two things that happen. People either hold on to it, they don't ever let it go, or they throw it over the fence, it doesn't go well, and they feel like they've proved themselves right. They're like, see, told you, that didn't go great, I'll just take it back now. Neither one of these are great. So we hand the ball over, but we don't leave them alone, right? Like we walk alongside them to get them to a point where they really understand what they're doing and they increase the productivity, and then we do it again and we do it again until it becomes like not so scary and horrible for people.
I'm laughing because I'm hearing giggling in the audience as if there's some people maybe who have issues. There might be some high performers in this room that have issues delegating. Well, I love what you have said about providing support to your team and having the humility and the wherewithal to say, I don't have all the answers, and how you take the heart of servanthood leadership, so to speak. You are at the top. However, we see you, hear you talking about these one-on-ones and developing leaders and coming alongside of them, because none of us have the answers. So I don't know, kicking the egos out to the curb is where they belong, and definitely getting help with the delegation. I think that's something that you can do with your one-on-ones. Like if that's an issue or a struggle, let's see how we can where can we delegate tasks so you can perform at your optimum level. So at this point, I just want to ask you, is there anything else you want to, any words of wisdom or anything that you want to share or expand upon, something we've already talked about? So we're going to open it up for a question and answer period next.
Yeah, I would say if I could leave you guys with one thing, and this is something that I hate to use the word mantra. I don't know why. I have like an aversion to that term. But it is something that I do find myself repeating to myself on a regular basis because it's easy to forget. But I really encourage you to bring yourself to work every day. Like, be yourself. Bring you, your actual real you. Your good days, your bad days, your busy days, your hard days. Bring yourself to work every day. Because if you do that again, it's establishing that culture of, hey, we celebrate each other. That's one of our cheesy values at our companies. We celebrate each other. The only way to do that is to celebrate the real people that we actually are. And that creates an environment for real communication, real relationship, real dialogue. And that allows you to invest in your people and teach them the big things and the little things. But it does start at the top, and you are at the top. And if you can't bring yourself to work every day, like if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then your people won't. So don't put your leader jacket on, take it off. No leader jackets here. Like, we're not the boss today. But show up as yourself. And I think you'll find that you'll have a lot more real connection with people on your team.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate this talk today.
Thank you for listening to the Impact Brevard podcast. We meet the first Thursday of every month. Business owners and leaders from all walks of life in all industries are welcome and encouraged to attend. Please email impactbrevard@ecc.us with any questions you would like answered or topics covered in future meetings, and receive RSVPs to upcoming events. Together, we can make an impact in Brevard for Christ.